So the first major collaboration you had with Kaija was this solo piece, Petals, that she started working on while she was living in Paris, and you by then were living in Paris as well, and she was working at IRCAM. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, well, I can tell you, but I have to explain those years in Paris before Petals, because we met basically in Paris. Okay. We became friends in Paris, but not because we were working together so much, but because we were two Finnish musicians living in Paris, and we both seemed to need somebody to talk to, and we spent our days speaking on the phone, talking on the phone almost daily, at least an hour, maybe every day, and it became kind of a routine, and in a way we had just done one collaboration before that, this early cello piano piece called Im Traume, which I had prepared with Tuija Hakkila without Kaija's help at the beginning, and then we met just the day before concert in Reykjavik, and she was never very happy with that piece, and she's actually taken that piece out of her catalogue since then, and it has only been performed once since then in the same concert where I premiered Petals. She was already then kind of embarrassed about this piece, but allowed us to play it with a little bit of electronics. That she made a little electronic, same kind of electronic treatment that she used in Petals, and she allowed us to play it once in Bremen in 1989, and then after that she said that no more, that's it. Anyway, so during these years between us playing the Im Traume and 1988 for Petals, we spoke about music, about everything possible, about her ideas of composing, my frustrations about being a cellist, and whatever ideas I had. We discussed this, but we didn't do actual collaboration, practical collaboration, until she started writing her string quartet Nymphea. And for that, because she was using electronics for that, and she was studying trying to get into the understanding of the spectral nature of the sounds of a string instrument, she asked me to go and do very simple recordings of just notes and kind of transformation of a sound. So I went quite often to IRCAM to record one note or two notes, or one note with adding a little bit of overpressure, or going from sul tasto to sul ponticello with one note. And she analyzed did the spectral analysis of those, and getting to understand the inner workings of a sound, or of the cello, and that was useful for her in writing the string quartet. And then once she'd finished that, she felt that she had all this material like hanging around in her head and on her desk, and on the floor. So she collected these petals and made them into a cello piece. But while she was writing, I knew she was writing it, but she didn't really. At least I don't remember that she would have ever shown me anything until the day she gave me the manuscript. And that the day she gave me the manuscript was the 20th of January 1988, which is the day when our daughter was born. She came to bring the manuscript actually that very day, same day.
Oh my gosh, what a great present.
I have the copy of the manuscript where she wrote the date, and and what I find always still amazing today is that she had developed this writing for language for cello, which I didn't need to ask anything to be changed. There was there's one place, I can't remember anywhere where it is, but there's one somewhere in the line 19. I remember that we switched 2 notes around. That was the only thing that we did, and then for all the other things, I found that although I had to invent new ways of using my fingers or my bow,
Right.
but I realized that she knew exactly that they were what she was doing, and that what she was doing would be possible for the cello, even if I didn't necessarily know it yet.
And she had never played cello before.
She never played the cello. She had played a little bit of violin as a teenager, but never enough to perform on it. But somehow, maybe all those years of talking on the phone and me describing, what I was thinking about the cello, and her, little bits of information and little bits of ideas, she was able to confirm with me ahead of time what was possible and what was useful for her language.
Wow. So after she gave you the manuscript, how much interaction was there between the two of you before the first performance of the piece? Did you play for her?
I surely did. It's like I have a very bad memory for this kind of details, and of course I'm even worse at writing things down. But we went through it, and she corrected most mistakes that I did, and we discussed details, but not so much that I didn't. For example, later on, after when I listened to the tape of the first performance, I realized that I played the whole 3 first lines in the wrong clef.
The eternal problem of cellists.
Yes, somehow, which I also have this habit of seeing what I want to see in music. I think it happens to all of us to some extent, that what you make your first reading mistake, and that you stick with that.
Right, exactly.
And I just read the beginning in the wrong clef, and since probably I even played it like that to her, but since we were talking about the trill, the overpressure, the harmonic trills, and all that, we were listening to about something else than the pitch.
Right.
We were actually talking about the speed of the tremolo, how much overpressure, what's the gesture. So luckily then I quickly corrected that mistake. But anyway, she wasn't even she didn't come to Bremen where we did the first performance, so she didn't hear the first performance of this piece. I can't remember now what the second performance was. I wrote some things or some performances here, but I don't know the dates. But anyway, she were at the beginning. I did a lot of the performances with the electronic version, with Kaija always doing the electronics herself, and because this is when she wrote this. This was done live, the electronics. So
Right.
there's reverb. What she has is reverb and harmonizer, and she was mixing those live in concert, which is not what happens nowadays very often, because nowadays people program it on the computer, and I feel that we actually lose the chamber music aspect of the piece, because when you do it especially when you do it with the composer herself, and I can feel her following with the harmonizer or with the reverb my playing, and what I hear affects the way I play.
So it's kind of like the electronics become a
She listens to me, exactly. She listens to me, and it's exactly like another player.
Right.
And that's the way I like to play this piece, because whenever I play it so that it's been programmed on Macs, and they are just written in as curves of from A to B crescendo of the harmonizer, and from B to C diminuendo of harmonizer, then I lack this. I don't get this feeling that we are actually doing this together. And with the way she uses electronics is so organic that I find that the pleasure of it is really in feeling that you are creating it together.
Right.
That goes as well for Prayer, which is a later piece, and we'll probably come to that in another video. But that's something that's I find it's very important to know for the player today, that there is a way, which is probably not today the first one offered to you when you play the electronic version, that to do it live is the real thing. So there is actually a period performance.
Right. So do you ever, or have you ever performed it without electronics?
Oh yeah, a lot. After we did the first performances with electronics, then I obviously she always meant it that it can exist in two versions, and I then started preferring to play it without electronics every time when Kaija wasn't around herself, because I really felt that it was only with her that I had another musician who knew the piece as well as I do. Whereas the interesting thing is that when you play it without electronics, often the audience, especially the people who are not very familiar with new music, they are even more impressed by the piece, by the way she uses the cello in the non-electronic version, because her way of writing for the cello, it sounds like you think that there must be electronics here somewhere, because she finds so many unusual ways of transforming a sound. So in a way, I find that it's a great introduction to the piece, to get to know it in the non-electronic version.
Right.
And then here the electronic version, which opens yet another dimension. It's really like three-dimensional piece, and then the fourth dimension that we can't imagine what it would be is when you get the electronics.
Right. Well, it's interesting because looking at so there are two versions, or two parts of the score. One is just the cello part that has all the indications, sul pont, sul tasto, and all that. But the electronic version, the version that includes the electronics, it doesn't mention the sul pont and sul tasto and all those indications. So I'm sure that you know well enough that you could play it from memory, but what version do you, if you were performing this, what version would you look at?
Now that's that's an important thing to mention, in the sense that I have had several cellists come to play this piece for me who have only had the electronic score, and they didn't know that there was the cello part somewhere.
Yes.
And the electronic score is not meant for the cellist to be looking at all. It is just for the for the sake of the person who's doing the electronics, so that he can follow. So that the person doing the electronics does not need to know sul ponticello, sul tasto, these things, but they need to be able to follow where I am.
Right.
So do not use and at the same time, I don't need to know what the electronic score tells the other person to do. I need to hear it. I need to react to what I hear.
Right.
So I have never looked at I've never looked at the electronic part when I play this piece. I look at that just to know that, okay, these are the things that are happening here, but apart from certain sudden transitions, I'm just reacting to what I hear. I may wait for go deeper into the effect of overpressure, or wait for crescendo even longer, depending how I hear it sounding in the hall through the electronics. But there are a couple of sudden transitions where I need to know that we have to look at each other, so that the other person knows exactly where I stop. Now this can also, if this is programmed on Macs, it can actually be done so that I control the electronics with a pedal. I trigger each thing, each beginning of a electronic transition with a pedal. But as I say, then from then on, only the triggering is controlled. The rest is programmed in. So then there's an aspect of excitement which is missing for me.
Right. So after you received and performed this the first time, did you have any idea the relationship that was blossoming and all the pieces that would come from your collaborations with Kaija?
I only realized that really now, 35 years later. Now that I see the number of pieces and I've been conscious, of course, over all these years that I constantly perform Kaija's music, and that there are a number of pieces that I'm playing, but it's because it's really it's really like we are living in a family. It's like I can't really describe how close we are, because it's when I'm playing her music and I have 2 or 3 other composers with whom I have this feeling that we've worked for so long together, that when I'm on stage playing their music, there is no border between me and the composer. I may be giving myself too much credit in the sense of I don't try to make myself more important than I am, but it's just something that you can only have if you know each other so well, and if you know 1 or 2 composers this well, then you know you can actually use that knowledge when you know another composer a little less well, but you can it's like filling the white spots in a painting, that when you know Cézanne's style, you don't even notice that some of his paintings have white dots, which he never finished. So in that sense, it's an absolutely essential part of my musicianship to have this relation, and which developed without us ever planning to do it with Kaija.
Right. What are some common misconceptions you've observed about people learning her music, or what do you think are some of the most important things to know for people who want to play her music?
Well, one thing that I've heard somebody say with my voice very often when people come and play her pieces is that one mustn't think that just because it looks different on the paper that it doesn't follow the same principles as any other piece of music, that it has phrases, it has shapes, it has architecture, and it uses your memory, some things come back, and you remember, I've already heard this before. So it may not be in a sonata form, but it has a form in every piece of music, including Kaija's. But people often don't notice that because there's so much to read, so much information. So you kind of start learning it from this bit of information to that bit of information, and then there are these 3 or 4 layers of information on top of each other, and by the time you've kind of figured those out, you've forgotten that all of this makes sentences, and the sentences make chapters, and so forth and so forth.
That's one thing that I love about listening to you perform her music and with your recordings, is that everything sounds so natural. Like I'm looking at certain parts of Petals and things that look on the page to have just so much overwhelming detail, but I never get the impression when I'm listening to you play that you're thinking about that, like, oh, you play this sul ponticello and then you move to normal and then you have a slow bow here and this, all
right.
These layers, but it just sort of happens.
Well, the thing is that, of course, when you learn this piece, that was the first thing I find myself saying to most people who are new to her music. The second thing that I hear again that person say in my voice is that you in order to learn all the details, you have to learn one layer at a time. Because otherwise you have to learn all the gestures separately, so that I know that, okay, this is one bow stroke, and during that one bow stroke my bow has to move horizontally but also vertically, going downwards towards the bridge, and also I need to add the pressure. So that's that's already 3 different things. I need to find the speed of the bow. I need to see how that's at that speed I go towards the bridge, and then how I add the pressure, and then I still haven't looked at the dynamics, and some of these for every gesture we do on an instrument, there's a kind of an organic way, the natural way. If you do a crescendo, it's always easier to play that on an up bow, because there's like the weight of the hand. Without you doing anything, you can get stronger unless you are careful. But often she uses these. She has these 3-4 different things happening at the same time, and one of them happens you do intuitively, but the second one is not an intuitive thing. So you have to teach your subconscious that to do two things at the same time, one of them feels natural, one of them feels unnatural, and you have to learn these gestures and make them all natural, so that it becomes part of your way of playing the cello. And once you get to that stage, that you've interiorized every aspect of that, then all of this becomes. Sometimes I've said that all of Kaija's music is, in fact, for me, only emotions. That I play it incredibly emotionally, in the sense that I think of what I feel emotionally with every phrase. That there's an emotional growth. There's a growth of some kind of anxiety, which then transforms into something else, and with that memory of emotion, these technical difficulties disappear. So in fact, I try to make everything as easy. I find I change in Kaija's music. I almost never decide bowings or fingerings at the beginning when I start working, because I need to find the most organic way, and that can only happen with time, by playing a lot and trying out everything. That maybe if I do this up bow, or no, actually down bow, or maybe I change the bow, no, maybe I don't change the bow. All of that, little by little, you find the most simple way to come to every gesture, and once you have that, then you only think of music.
Right.
And then so I don't feel like you've asked me some specific questions about how do I do a certain thing, and I really have to sit down and take my cello and look at my hands to see how I do it, because it's so much kind of become an automatic thing.
Right. So a lot of times I feel like when people aren't sure how to play something, they will go and listen to a recording or watch a video of someone playing it and try to copy everything that performer does. And I definitely found myself doing that when I was learning c'est papillon, like before I came and played it for you, because I was like, oh, okay, let me see what Anssi's doing here in the recording. Oh, it sounds like he changes this bow there, and so maybe I should change my bow there too. So do you suggest that when people are learning Kaija's music specifically, that they sort of take the route that you're suggesting, where you find what works best for you, or is there a sort of language or vocabulary of techniques that one discovers when they've played enough of her music, that they sort of understand how to approach?
Well, the problem with this, with your question, is that we don't know. Very often, when somebody comes to play a piece by Kaija or any other composer to me, I ask them, how many pieces of this composer do you know? And most of the time they know, maybe I've heard one other piece, or I haven't heard anything else. I went to listen to some YouTube video of this piece, and so who was it? I don't know. So from these premises, you can't hope to get very far, because even just by doing the work yourself, it took me 35 years to almost 40 years to playing Kaija's music to get where I am today, and to have these convictions I have. And still I find myself sometimes making mistakes that I need to change, because I'm understanding something better. So it's very important that you either do really well your homework of getting to know the composer. But that's a big work today, where we all have to learn. We should do that with we need to do that with every single composer. So it's a never ending, but that's just how it is. That's the reality. But in order to speed up the process, it's obviously helpful to speak to somebody who has that experience. But if you speak to two cellists who know Kaija, me and somebody else, there are many other cellists who have played her music a lot, I'm absolutely certain that you will hear two completely different stories, and we may agree on many of the things, but it doesn't mean that my truth is the only truth. But in a way, I prefer that I get the chance to share my truth with my version of the truth with those people who don't have experience with her music, because at least they get a glimpse to something that Kaija has approved, and then you all, everybody goes their own ways. But at some point, I think that it is really important to meet the person who was there. And in Kaija's, in case of Kaija's cello music, I happen to have been there many times. But when I play music by Elliott Carter, I certainly go talk to Fred Sherry. Or when there are any number of composers, and when I know somebody who has worked with them, I make sure that I go to those people and I fill those blanks. But it doesn't mean that you just go to the YouTube and you click on the first video that happens to come up, because you don't know if those people did their homework. So that's why YouTube is a fantastic tool. All of these new technologies, they are fantastic tools that can be helpful, but they can also point you in the wrong direction.